the admin, ward clerk, ward-related jobs, right? Rather than the clinical stuff. You're not in theatres doing operations. You're not kind of clerking patients and managing them from start to end, right? You're doing a lot of the running around. The shame is that we're losing so many doctors to these other countries who've kind of somehow perfected or created a great environment. Don't do it at the expense of happiness. At the end of the day, medicine isn't your identity. It shouldn't overwhelm you, right? There are different sources of contentment from many different sources that are better at 70% than trying to derive 100% contentment from being a surgeon.
5 years, like med school is a long period of time. In 5 years from now, your priorities are going to change. You might have a family. You might be living somewhere else. You may be, married. Like your circumstances always change. And if you're not constantly looking at your life and looking at how you're spending your time and whether it's still keeping you as motivated and happy as it did when you first, joined med school, then it can be quite difficult.
When you empathize, when you understand, when you give them that antibiotic and it suddenly just changes things, or when they come in with a kidney stone and you give them a bit of just painkillers and suddenly they can walk again and they're not hunched up and in agony, that the fulfillment you get from them being so well all of a sudden is incredible, and they are so grateful to you. They are genuine from the bottom of their hearts, so grateful. I had a patient say, "I'm going to pray for you for the rest of my life," and I was like,
what is going on, guys? My name is Kenji and welcome back to the channel. Hopefully it's not the first time you're watching one of my videos, but just in case it is, I'm a final year medical student and a biomedical science graduate studying at King's College London. And today I have two junior doctors and entrepreneurs who I really look up to and I find very, very interesting, and I'm sure you guys will as well. So boys, if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you guys do.
I'll let you go first, Abdul.
Thanks for the invitation, Kenji.
No worries, thanks for coming on.
You're absolutely killing it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so my name's Abdul. I'm a junior doctor, King's graduated a few years ago. At the moment, we'll probably talk about later. So both me and Abdul are out of training. We just kind of locum in a mini A&E department. We co-host the Scrubbed In podcast and more recently co-founded the media platform called Peer.
Wicked. Okay. Kenji, so first of all, thank you so much for bringing us onto your show. My name's Ams, same history, same background. So junior doctor, graduated from King's and fell into the world of entrepreneurship, really. I never planned to. Me and Abdul both planned to be orthopods. And life just decided, no, you're not going to be a surgeon, you're going to be entrepreneurs, really.
Nice.
And we have a single mission, which is to basically put education into the hands of everyone. That's how I like to say it, to socialize it. So that's our mission.
I'm really looking forward to actually getting into the the specifics of what you guys have described here, your business and stuff like that. But if we can take a step back all the way to your days when you were 18, 17, maybe even 16. You may not have the same stories, but how did you guys get to where you are today and where you are now?
So I think it's the classical Asian parent story, isn't it? Nice. They always dreamt of me becoming a doctor and everything. And back as a sort of student going through secondary school and college, I think I did want to always be a doctor. It's one of those things where if you aspired high, if you aspired to anything, it was like, okay, so I'm good at sciences, so I think I want to be a doctor. That's the pinnacle of success, right? But I don't think it was ever a realistic thing back in the days, in the sense that I went to a state school. Classes were as big as 40 in a classroom. It was very difficult to teach in the area that I went to. So I really sort of feel for the teachers that had us as students. And you know what? It was one of those things where I think only once I reached college and I saw my grades and I thought, you know what, maybe I can become a doctor. These grades match the entry requirement. And I would say I squeezed into medicine. I wouldn't say I sort of was gunning for it and I absolutely knew I was going to get in. I got the coach and I got in. I think I squeezed in. I think it was one of those things I fell into. That's my story, really. On how I got into medicine.
Nice. Quick break from the podcast to tell you guys about Magic Mind. And if you guys have been watching my channel, then you know that for the last couple of months, I've been really using it to increase my focus, clarity, and productivity, which is super important since starting my role and job as a doctor very recently. So if you guys want to check out Magic Mind and see how you can also achieve similar results, then click the link down below in the description or use the code on the screen to get you guys 20% off your order from Magic Mind. Now back to the podcast. How about you, Abdul?
So I'm like not the smartest cookie in the jar type of kids, right? Mm-hmm. So earlier in secondary school, just messing around, talking much in class, not paying attention to my studies. Come year 9, year 10, started to kind of realize GCSE, SATs, did awful in all the mock exams. Mm-hmm. And my mum kind of pulled me up and said, look, you need to sort your life out. Education is mad important. Those kids that go out most of the time after school and they're hanging around, probably not getting up to the best of things. That was me.
Okay.
So he had to be sat down. That's the difference. So I didn't need to be sat down.
No. So my mum kind of pulled me out and said that you need to kind of focus on studies. It's important. Okay. What we're going to do is get you a tutor, right? So the tutor I had, just by sheer luck, was a maths graduate from Harvard. Okay. That kind of moved over to UK and was working in the city, and he kind of wanted to give back, earn a bit of side hustle, side income, tuition, right? So that's what I did. And you have to imagine for someone kind of growing up in the Council Estates of London, we're exposed to a whole different world, right? And then all of a sudden, every week I meet this chap, and he's kind of showing me a different way of the world, right? Look, this is what you can do if you put your mind to it. This is the potential. If you go to university, you can do X, Y, and Z, right? Okay. And your eyes kind of open up, and you kind of see this is what they're doing in the ends. This is what they're doing in my community. Whereas I have someone here who's absolutely killing it in life, right? And my perception and mindset changed slightly. Medicine came a bit later on. I don't know how it was at the time where if you start performing well in exams, you kind of get this, not pressure, but this feeling of do you know what, you have to do medicine now. It's a waste of talent. So the teachers kind of pushed us towards it. I did have a bit of an interest, and I saw a friend of mine whose brother got into med school at King's years ago, and I thought, do you know what, if he got in, maybe there's a chance for me. Bear in mind, all up until kind of application season, UCAS, I never really thought I'd get into med school. Do you know what I mean? I did it for the sake of it. I rocked up to my interview at King's wearing a baseball jacket and trainers, right? I was not prepared for it at all. I don't know, in a way, I feel like we just ended up doing medicine. I never set out to really do medicine. I wasn't gunning for it. And I was totally comfortable with not getting into med school, if that kind of makes sense. I know it's so bad. I'm sure you have a lot of aspiring medics.
No, I want to hear the truth.
But you have to imagine... you have to imagine the environment we came from, the stuff we saw. It was a very different world growing up. I'm talking about 10, 12 years ago, by the way. But and we ended up in med school. And the first person I sat down in med school was Ams. We had a similar background. And we kind of clicked from then, from the first day of med school, and we're still here together.
I'd love to hear that story because you're both quite similar in terms of your humor and stuff like that, but you also have such different kind of paths into medical school. So just seeing that contrast is it's so nice to hear, and so nice to see the different stories and how now you both ended up, kind of on the same level still in terms of what you're doing, your interests and stuff like that. So really good to hear.
It was still different in med school.
Yeah. It was still what, sorry?
I think I'm going to put it out there. Yeah, so we're very similar but very different. Ams was a first centile ranking student, right? And I was on the bottom end. So...
humble is lying.
Hey, we made it in the end, so that's what matters, right? So
exactly, man. Exactly.
What I want to know as well is, so you went through med school. You both were together in med school. Eventually went on to be junior doctors, which is what I'm going to be doing in this summer as well. What were your experiences like as junior doctors? If we can start off by talking about what you enjoyed about the job.
I think so. I'll talk about a little bit my experience. So when walking in on the first day as an F1, right, the feeling is really, really different. It's so different to being a medical student because what happens, all of that knowledge, all of that clinical placement, all of the experience that you've tried to accumulate, suddenly when the nurse turns around and says, doctor, usually as a med student, I remember I'd say, all right, let me go and find the doctor. Yeah. But this time around, it's you. And when they say, doctor, this patient's unwell and you need to go review them, it's suddenly, it's me that's being called upon. I had a funny moment when I was an F1 on the wards. It was the first week, and when they told me, doctor, this patient's unwell, I was like, all right, let me go and find someone. And I just realized, wait, I am that someone. I am the F1 that they're looking to go and do the first primary assessment.
Yeah.
So it is a real surreal moment when it's just suddenly you switch from being a student to being responsible for people's lives, and it's an absolute privilege. Even as I know we've moved into the world of entrepreneurship, but I still always say medicine is one of the best jobs you can ever have. It's incredible the feeling that you get. I'd say when also doing the jobs, I'd say, and this is something just to be real and transparent, no matter how good you are. So as Abdul said, I performed quite well at med school. I turned up to everything, every single board round. I didn't bunk anything, man. I was there. I was there. And he was there in my ear whispering, "You can miss this, man. You can miss this."
Respect.
Bro, there were days, right? So the night before, we always used to plan. I always used to know what I wanted to do the next day. I'd love to plan. I'd love to plan what I want to do the night before, and I'd be like, "You are going to turn up to this ward round, this lecture, right?" So here I am, 7 a.m., busting my gut. I walk in, getting through the rush hour traffic, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to turn up till like 1 p.m." So I was that guy.
Okay.
And you know what? And this is to be just real. No matter how clever you are, F1 is a difficult step, right?
Okay.
Because of the responsibility on you and what you're going to do. And it's okay. It's okay for it to be difficult. And I always say to people, it's okay to ask for help. Man, I was asking the nurses, the physios, the ward clerk. I was asking the consultants, the registrars. I wasn't afraid of asking dumb questions, man. I was asking things like, even when it came to simple like bloods and where you send them and how you pod them, I just asked them like, where do I put it? How do I do it? What's the right butterfly to use? And you know what? It's okay. Everyone does it, and if they say they don't, man, you'll find them in the storeroom looking up geeky medics. I think we've all been there. So yeah, F1 was a difficult step up. I would say personally, I found it difficult at first because I felt suddenly I was alone and my theory was there, but how I applied it wasn't there. And the biggest key is experience, man. As you put yourself in there, just have the courage to put yourself in the spot. If I use a footballer's analogy, it's like if you're not in the box, if you're not in the square, you're not going to score a goal. So you just have to keep on turning up every day, asking for help, asking for support, and I think you get there. That's my experience. And tips to pass on.
That's so good, because I always find it really, really strange because there is no transition period between being a medical student and being a doctor. One day you're a medical student with no responsibility, no lives in your hands, and the next day you're that guy, or you're supposed to be that guy at least. There is no like midpoint, which is quite scary, and it's something I definitely am a little bit nervous about starting F1 soon, but also like really excited about to see how that transition can actually happen.
Absolutely.
And also knowing that I can ask for help is just so reassuring as well. Yeah, Abdul, how about you, man? What was your experience like?
So, my experience is a lot different. So, let me give you a bit of context, right?
Okay.
And then there's a lot of lessons in this for that. So, I was gunning to kind of work in London. My friends and family are in London, right? I've never lived out, other than kind of medical placements, right? So, I stacked the SJT exam. I performed bad, like awful, right? And it brought my kind of ranking down, and I ended up going to Coventry, right?
Okay.
And I remember the first time I put my screen, I'm like in Coventry. I closed the screen and I went back to sleep, and I couldn't believe it. It took me weeks to kind of accept the fact that, I'm getting shipped out to Coventry to work and work as a junior doctor. So I went out to Coventry to do obviously foundation training F1 and 2, F1, F2. I was super homesick. Like, I'm not used to living out by myself. Not my friends and family were there. Yeah. My first rotation was Gen Surge as an F1.
Oh, wow.
At the time, our SHO had left, and the week we started was the post-take week for that consultant surgeon. So in essence, it's his week where all the new patients are admitted under him. So from the get-go, like, you're running around, you're trying to learn things on the job itself. Luckily, I had a supportive team. I had supportive F1s, and we kind of all stuck in together and helped. But I think the fact that I was kind of homesick, long days, weekends, and you're kind of coming home to an empty home sometimes and no one's there was a bit of a struggle. But like Cam said, it's like the learning curve is steep, and we all say it, and it's very difficult to understand, when medical students sit there, but you learn so much so quickly. And I think the key thing is asking for help, being safe, and it's like you have responsibilities. Like like I said, I used to never used to turn up to lectures. I used to mess around. I used to do things here and there, right? But you need to turn up. People, you're responsible for people. When patients are unwell, nurses are bleeping you, right?
Yeah.
And you better, rush there and sort it out.
Yeah.
So that was a bit, exactly. Do you know what I mean? It was such a surreal.
I've got teaching.
Yeah, then you can't go teaching, man. And that responsibility was like something crazy, like we've never experienced before. But I think I tried to kind of take in my stride. And the one thing I do say is, irrespective of where you get placed for your dean and where you get placed for F1, F2, it does not make you a lesser doctor. Okay. I know, especially with Kings, it's like everyone wants to work in South Thames, everyone wants to work in North Central, right?
Yeah.
And there's this perception that if you're a London doctor, you're better than other doctors in the rest of the country. That's not true. By the time you finish F1, F2, I genuinely believe most doctors average out. And just because you're a first centile student at med school doesn't necessarily make you a good doctor, right?
Absolutely.
It's the other soft skills that you learn and you pick up. And Kings is very good, right? Communicating, breaking bad news, working with nurses, other kind of teams in the MDT, right?
Yeah.
So advice to people that kind of didn't get the deanery they wanted to get, you are no less of a doctor. And the learning curve may even be better. Because I did Gen Surg and AMSA surgery, but 4 or 5 o'clock when we're going home, consulting used to grab me by the collar and be like, Abdul, do you know what? There's a gallbladder perf or something. We need you in theatres. There's no one else here. It's just me and you, buddy.
Mad.
And I've been doing like operations with the consultant, operations with the reg. And at the time, me and Andrew both wanted to become orthopedic surgeons, right? And it was sick, bro. Like the amount of theatre experience I got was second to none compared to the people in London or other competitive deaneries. So it was a blessing in disguise for me. I did learn, and I learned how to become independent. I learned how to live out by myself. But yeah, that's kind of my advice. And the second advice, funny story, when people do the kind of, what's it called? When you apply to get the jobs and stuff.
Kenji will know. What's the application called?
Oral?
FPAS? Oral, yeah. Oral, yeah.
Oral, yeah. So basically, we both kind of managed to get publications through med school, but I kind of copy and pasted the numbering wrong, and I missed out on those points.
No.
So that brought my IPM down. And you can imagine, it's 0.1 of a difference between London and other cities. So anyone listening, don't make the same mistake as me. Be diligent in your applications. Copy and paste numbers properly. Check it 3 times, because you're going to lose out on points like me.
Okay. And that's so interesting to hear. What I think as well, in terms of my opinion, I've actually... Obviously, I was in London for third year and pretty much all of third year. So I was in those like central London hospitals. I was in King's College Hospital, Guy's, St Thomas's. For fourth year and fifth year, I then went out to the kind of outskirts in Kent. What I found is that my experience there actually was better. The reason being is that when you're in these peripheral hospitals, you're not the 10th person in line to see something really cool. If you're in London in these really big hospitals, it's normally the reg who's there. It's going to be, some other person who's visiting that actually wants to see what's going on. So by the time the actual presenting complaints from the patient reaches you, the patient's like so tired, they do not want to like allow you to listen to their chest. Whereas if you're out in Kent, you're there's a doctor who's seeing you, and then it's you. There's no visiting specialists. There's no all these like specialists around there to like get their hands in. So it's really nice to have that, and also remembering like what you guys said. Asthma is asthma, whether you're in London or whether you're in Scotland. The actual disease is the same thing, right? So the disease is not going to vary. Right, so the exposure you get to different patients is going to be more or less the same, and like you said, after 2 years, it tends to just average anyways. So I really agree with what you guys said there. If we could flip the coin now, so what about the job did you guys maybe not really enjoy as much? If you go into a bit of detail on that.
So let me tell you what I hate about the job. Right, I love kind of hanging out with my mates, going out, chilling. Like, I was born and brought up in central London, right? Albeit not the fancy parts of central London. The fact that we had to work weekends and nights, right? And I'm missing out and going out and stuff like that took a big hit on me. Okay. But that was a big thing, the rota, right? But that's part of medicine, right? Like, any medical student knows you're going to be working weekend and night. I think the bit that... was difficult for me in the job was sometimes, and obviously there's a lot of issues in the NHS in terms of like staffing, resources, etc. It was the little things that were frustrating for me, especially as a junior doctor, right? There were on calls where we were running around, or I was running around from ward to ward looking for like a certain blood taking kit, or
Okay.
you're looking after 2 or 3 more wards because someone didn't turn up, or there's not enough staff, or there's not a senior cover. It's the little stuff like that that make a very difficult job even more difficult, especially if you're a junior doctor, right? And I remember one weekend I was covering pretty much all the surgical patients, and there's loads of admissions. You're trying to go to theatres to help as well. And I remember there was this moment where I was kind of kicking myself, in one of the rooms, thinking, did I make the right decision?
Okay.
Like, am I here? Am I really enjoying this? Like, it's such little patient clinical knowledge, right? Like, it's more like ward jobs, admin, taking bloods, bloods that were missed in the morning, chasing jobs that were supposed to be done like a day or two ago, right? It was a little stuff like that that kind of became a bit frustrating. You're thinking, yo, this is like, I didn't sign up for this. What we took med school was not a true indicator of what reality was when you're a junior doctor on the shop floor. And I think the best way to describe it was, medicine is probably one of the best jobs in the world, and the highs are highs, meaning there were times when I stuck a catheter in a gentleman at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. He went into acute urinary retention, and he was relieved, right? And he held my hand and he was thankful. And you're like, do you know what? I really got to do something awesome today. There are days where it's awful. And I say the highs in medicine are high. The highs are super high, euphoric almost. But the lows are low. Like, they are bad. There are some days you are struggling, you are burnt out, you haven't eaten all day. And like, you need to take the good with the bad. And I quickly learned, like, you just need to get on with it. You need to survive. Like, you need to adapt. Like, the NHS isn't overnight going to change. You're not going to get a bunch of new doctors joining. You're not going to get all the resources in the world. The computers aren't going to start to load up quicker, right? It's kind of adapting and kind of having frameworks in place to look after yourself, man. But it was the little stuff that do add up and make it a bit difficult, if I'm honest.
Okay. And so with that, do you think that's something I've heard very, very frequently, by the way, like all the things you described, from all the people I've interviewed and just talked to as well in the hospital, that seems to be quite a common thing. In your opinion, do you think that is a failure in the system, or things that can be easily solved? Or do you think it's just like the reality of what we sign up for as doctors that might be the case in Australia or America or Kenya or wherever we go? What do you think?
So I think the future is actually bright. So in the sense that I've experienced why it's actually so difficult. So for example, where I work, right, they've recently, very newly introduced electronic prescribing. Now you'd think, what, that was designed years and years and years ago. But I was there on the night that it was rolled out, right? And just that transition period to make it safe for patients. So remember, the overarching goal is patients' lives, making sure we deliver the best care. Imagine if you was a patient on that night, right? You don't want to miss out on, you don't want delays, all of that jazz. So I was there on the night the transition occurred, and it genuinely is a havoc, right? Having to transition, because the way you sign off meds, the way you check it, the way you prescribe it, all of that changes. The login portals, all of that. And it's not just you using it as the doctor who's prescribing. It's the nurse who's checking. It's the nurse who's administering. It's the whole team that's affected by it, right? The pharmacy team and everyone else. So it was incredibly difficult, that period. It was difficult as a clinician. Now, so I've seen the difficulty of it. But then this is where, so those frustrations that you talk about, the discharge summaries, why are they quite tedious to do? The fact we're still faxing stuff across. So these little things that are still there, right? Now, if you look into the NHS entrepreneurship program, right, you've got, for example, shout out MediShout here, right? So I was once working and I saw a registrar. I literally just watched him because I know about MediShout. It works so well. And I saw him for about 2 hours report a broken computer. This is a registrar that could see patient after patient I could say maybe every 20 minutes and clear them in A&E, right? Now, 2 hours he spent just reporting it. MediShout is an app, right, where you can literally just, just report a fault, an issue, send the location, the computer that's a problem within a click of a button or something like that, right? That's going to solve that issue. That's going to bring more hours for patient care and relieve that registrar from the frustration of hammering that PC down. So the frustrations are typical, they're common. As you've said, you've heard it from not just ourselves, you've heard it from many, many doctors, and you've probably seen it on Twitter. But I think the future is brighter. There's more. The NHS, Professor Tony Young, is empowering innovation, entrepreneurship. So these frustrations are being fixed by the people closest to the problems. So yeah.
Okay, so do you guys think that's an NHS thing, or do you think it's just the reality of life as a doctor? So where do you think the balance is? Is it NHS specifically, or is it just just being a doctor in general that all these problems just come with the job itself?
So I think like there's two things at play here. There's being a doctor as your job, as in medicine, and then there's the environment you work in. And like someone put it nicely, it's like being a doctor is probably one of the best jobs in the world, but sometimes working in the NHS as a doctor is a bit more difficult and frustrating. Whereas let's say you take that best job in the world and take them to America or Australia, New Zealand or Kenya, like you mentioned, the work environment may be better, and then it becomes like a super, super awesome job in the world, right? Naturally, when you're in a system and you're going there day in, day out, and the little frustrations, human nature is it's going to start to take a toll on you. When there's a lack of resources or staffing issues, it's naturally going to take a toll on you. There's only so much you can kind of go on goodwill and kind of do it for the sake of the job, especially as a junior doctor. You're doing a lot more of the admin, ward clerk, ward-related jobs, right? Rather than the clinical stuff. You're not in theatres doing operations. You're not kind of clerking patients and managing them from start to end, right? You're doing a lot of the running around. And I think, having spoken to people, it does get better when you do get more senior, right?
Okay.
But the shame is that we're losing so many doctors to these other countries who've kind of somehow perfected or created a great environment for junior doctors. And it's very easy for them to leave, especially if they've got, they're one of those individuals that don't have many ties in London or wherever they may be. They're willing to kind of take a gamble and risk for that kind of better life per se.
Okay, I think you divided it and spoke about it so well and so beautifully. Like I can definitely see it in my head where the problems might lie. Okay, and if we can take it on to a bit more of a juicier topic. So how did your experience as junior doctor then kind of change to where you are now, being entrepreneurs, starting Peer.io? Why did you then decide to kind of not leave medicine, because you are still working here and there as a doctor, but why did you decide to not pursue kind of a training career and then be where you guys are now?
Oh, it's a long story. I think Peer is like... So Peer is a platform we launched where we're trying to socialize education. But Peer, it's not an accident. It came after a lot of things, to be fair. So I think it all started from the Scrubbed In podcast, which obviously you were a guest on as well, which led to Peer. So obviously the story is I was in Coventry, I was a bit homesick. I was a bit bored, didn't have anything to do.
Yeah.
I called Ams one night when he was in, Mauritius, on your honeymoon or something like that, right? Okay. And I said to Ams, like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, bro, like, yo, pick up the phone, I've got a sick idea. And he was like, it was so bad. But he picked up, right? And it was basically this concept of, yo, let's do a podcast, let's share our story, let's try and inspire people. There's a lot of people from our background that, you need to listen to motivating, so you need to see people that have been there, done it, right? Just to be infused, just to be like, you know what, if they've done it, we can do it, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, we clearly can't edit. We're not going to learn videography, video editing anytime soon, right? Shout out to Ali Abdal's course, though, that taught us a lot. So we went on YouTube, thought, what's the easiest modality? What's the easiest form of putting content out there where we can share our story? Podcasting in medicine wasn't that, it was popular, but not many podcasts were around at the time. It took about a few years ago.
Okay.
So we launched the Scrubbed In podcast, and we kind of shared our journey through medical school, getting into med school, kind of surviving F1, F2. And obviously we're so junior in your career that the content stopped, in the sense that we couldn't talk about being a reg, we couldn't talk about consultancy, we couldn't talk about sitting particular exams, right? And then it was basically, why don't we bring on other people in healthcare that have incredible stories for us to learn and get inspired, and other people that listen to kind of tune in and be motivated and kind of learn from their insights.
Okay.
And we became heavily invested in kind of audio content. We found it such an intimate way of learning and hearing about someone, getting into their mindset. Imagine you're spending 40-45 minutes with someone, right? You're hearing their story.
Yeah.
And then we soon discovered audio-driven learning. So AMS has a passion for teaching, learning, Merge Stock at King's, he was the president, OSCEs, all of that stuff, he's done it, right? Publications, he's done all of that stuff. And we realized that, do you know what? Audio-driven learning is a thing. It's never done in medicine. And AMS is a very good storyteller. And he thought, what if we could kind of teach through storytelling? What if we can simulate cases? So you stick on your AirPods, you stick on your earphones, and it starts off this week, a 64-year-old gentleman comes into A&E with chest pain. Okay. And we kind of embarked on this journey of audio-driven learning off the back of the Scrubbed In podcast, right?
Okay.
And then we kind of thought, all right, people are learning from these cases. They're learning on the go. We're kind of adding a different modality of learning that's unconventional, right? People use past notes, past tests. They use textbooks, right?
Yeah.
So this was quite different. We started to kind of share quizzes on Instagram, right?
Mm.
And then maybe this is when the kind of the accidental entrepreneur thing kicked in, where he's like, hey, do you know what? Why don't we build a dedicated app called Podcases, which we later launched, where download the app, there's a bunch of cases, there's a bunch of quizzes, right?
Okay.
Having tested it on kind of our Scrubbed In podcast channels, tested it on Instagram, we kind of went out, designed it, developed, etc. And then we basically had this custom built app for Podcases where we used to kind of share audio-driven cases with quizzes, right? And then the pivot for peer came, and I'll explain what we very soon realized with Podcases that made us think, you know what, we need to change into peer.
In terms, so in terms of the Podcases app, right? So what we did was we allowed people from around the world to start sharing patient cases.
Okay.
Obviously anonymized and everything.
Yeah.
Now, it was purely because what you'll find is that if I throw the Oxford Handbook at you, right, and just talk to you about ACS, right?
Yeah.
You might forget, you might retain a little bit. But the moment I depict a story to you about the 65-year-old gentleman that came to me clutching his chest, telling me the pain was going into his abdomen, and then when I did a CT scan, he had a dissection from his chest into his leg. You suddenly like, I remember that case. I remember what I did. I remember what to do. And a good example is I listened to a case that was, again, given to us by Dr. Nikki Stamp. Okay. She's a very world-renowned cardiothoracic surgeon from Australia. And what was weird was that after I learned that case, after I learned it from her, 2 weeks later, I saw the exact case present to me. Okay. And I just had flashbacks to what she was saying and teaching. So it was the power of that. And then what we realized was that all of us are naturally, we love teaching. Like Kenji, I bet you're teaching your juniors. I bet they're coming to you for advice.
Have you not seen his channel?
I've seen your channel. You're telling them how, you're giving us the insider's knowledge. And what we realized was that a lot of people love teaching, but you know what? It's not fair because part of the due is not given back to the educator. So for example, we were doing what we thought was wrong in the sense that if you gave me a case today, I would rebrand it as Podcases app. I'd just put in Tiny by Kenji and then I'd publish it. But the world sees it through Podcases. They're not seeing it through Kenji, right? So what we wanted to do was we wanted to return the power into the hands of educators. So we said, you know what? Let you have your own account. Let you have your own face, your own portal. So when people are studying, they're studying from Kenji, not from Amzan Abdul publishing Kenji's case. And then part of the reason why we also did that was that most educators were losing that equity. Right? What would happen was if you wrote up a medical case or something like that, you'd have two options. You'd either sell that content for cheap, a single flat fee to a company, whoever it may be, or you might try and put it out yourself. But the thing is, you're a junior doctor, you might be training, you're on 7-day on calls. Doing the marketing, the branding, all of that takes effort. What if we took the hard bit out of you, right? And we just let you teach. That was point 2. And I'll give you the point 3 now. This is why I personally love peer-to-peer teaching, right? And your YouTube videos are a prime example of it. The one that you put up on how to write an essay to get a first class. Is it over 1 million views it's sitting at? Is it over 1 million?
Almost 1 million now.
Almost 1 million, exactly. So my thing is this. You don't need to learn from a professor telling you how to get a first. Sometimes the best teacher is the person who's a step in front of you, 2 steps in front of you, right? Yeah. You've just done it. You know the know-how. I watched it and I was like, damn, like I know how to write an essay even better now. From Kenji. And Kenji, you're my peer. You're someone who's around me. We can learn from each other and we can teach each other and we can do well together. Collaboration is better than malicious competition. I always say that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's such a good point. And I think that professor who's, let's say, written so many academic papers, is super successful in his career. Yeah. He's almost so far away from where you are today. So for him to sit down and explain how to write an essay from the basics is almost impossible. Like it's just too far away. Yeah. But to learn it from your peer who actually knows and remembers exactly what you've gone through, because that was him yesterday, it's way more relatable. And that's why I think peer sounds actually really, really good. And I fully understand what you guys said.
You know, one other thing is that it's also the flavor of teaching, you know. So me, you, and Abdul could sit here and teach, ACS, acute coronary syndrome, right? Now, there will be students out there that prefer it from you, prefer it from me, prefer it from Abdul. It's about preference as well, whose style resonates with you. Sometimes you like someone who's got loads of hand gestures or brings in diagrams. Sometimes you like someone who just tells you a story, in fact. So it's also the flavor and what you get from it. Everyone's different. And that's why I say everyone should be involved in teaching, because everyone will have something to learn and a specific type of person to learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay, so I can definitely see how this benefits, students and the future of learning. But what I want to know is what kept you guys motivated to pursue this? Because I don't know if I heard it from Little Birdie. I don't know if I made this up or what. But if I possibly heard you were turning down 100k jobs, £100,000 jobs a year to pursue this, to pursue what you're pursuing. And also you guys had huge aspirations to go into orthopedics, to become big surgeons. So why not just stick with the traditional career of medicine? What kept you guys going?
It's a very good question.
Why are we rejecting all of that? You know what it is? So obviously, if we go back a few years, this all started in parallel, right? We were F1s doing the podcasting, right? Yeah. And what happens is, as you do things in parallel, and I would say, you know what, it's fine to do things in parallel. You should be doing it. I think Ali Abdal says it as well. Do it part-time, do it alongside, and then lean into what you love and what you enjoy and what gives you that fulfillment. And you know what happened was, so I love education. I love teaching. I love the concept of peer-to-peer education. And I do it in the job as well. I love teaching alongside working as well. And what happens is, the world of entrepreneurship, as you unpackage it, right, it teaches you so much. So we started off with podcasting. Suddenly you're learning how to Photoshop, how to do videos, how to edit, how to go out and speak to people, communication skills. So us talking on this podcast, right, it's also incredible value in the sense that it hones your ability to speak, to storytell. So when you're also speaking to a patient, you know how to talk to them and how to empathize with them and how to sort of get them on board with the management plan. Because remember, it's shared care nowadays. You need to bring them on board and negotiate what they're going to be on. So entrepreneurship started to open up a different world of fulfillment for me. And I realized was that I love the portfolio aspect to a career. So you know how a specialist, you go down, you become a super specialist. It's needed in the world. If I was going to have my gallbladder taken out, I want someone who loves the idea of a gallbladder and knows the anatomy inside out. So we need those as well. But that didn't enthuse me. It didn't make me jump out of bed. Right now, like, I finished a shift. I came home at 4 a.m. Dude, I sprung out of bed because we've got podcast recordings to do. We've got loads of peer stuff to do. And to speak to you, it just enthuses me to be in this world with you as well. So yeah, you know what? It's pushing me to the limits. I'm learning new things. I love the entrepreneurship network where everyone's collaborative. Everyone's helping you solve a problem that's not been solved before. And you know what? There's a life mission I have now as well. And you know, through peer-to-peer education, right, you're genuinely able to connect education across the world, and you're able to put education into hands to someone who doesn't have. So, for example, everyone's got a mobile phone these days, right? So banking has now evolved into being through apps and stuff. It's because more people have mobile phones than physical bank accounts. Now, we can't neglect the fact that that also means that we can connect King's students, Harvard students, Stanford students, all the way across to the opposite side of the world, and we can transfer knowledge. And I believe we can do that. So it's become a life mission, and I just love it. I just love it, man. That's the fundamental of it. I just love it.
I think the main thing is, like, our ethos, or what I highly encourage is, just because you set out to be a surgeon, just because you set out you want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, cardiologist, you should not kind of stick at it and be so driven to it when kind of the rest of your life is falling apart. You shouldn't do it at the expense of family, relationships, or social life, right? And you're hating your job, you hate working, you hate kind of waking up and doing all the stuff you never enjoy. Just things change, aspirations change, motivations change, responsibilities change, right? And if you don't like doing something, don't do it. Like, I'm a big advocate for it. Change it, right? Obviously, it's easier said than done. And there was a moment where we realized that, do you know what? Building peer, we can have impact. We can socialize education. We can kind of put education into the hands of everyone around the world, make sure educators get fair equity in the system, right? And the fulfillment and happiness I got from peer and podcasting and all of this stuff at one point was more than working as a junior doctor, right? Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy being a junior doctor.
Yeah.
But my purpose and mission changed. And it was hard, don't get me wrong. We had kind of the portfolio early on from medical publications, conferences, all the different courses, right, to be budding surgeons, right? And then you look at your registrar, you look at your consultant, and you kind of see, is this the life I want to live? Are they happy? Are they content? Are they having genuine impact? And once you do that, once you kind of see what's happening, your missions change, your purpose changes, right? And that can change. Don't be stuck on one thing because you thought of that at 6 years old that you want to be a surgeon, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? Let's take a gamble. So we officially left training and pursue peer, and the happiness it gives, that I enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? More so than I did the day-to-day work as a junior doctor.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense. You probably
Absolutely.
think we lost the plot.
No,
But,
I really
it's about
like
happiness,
that.
bro. At the end of the day, when you wake up, you want to enjoy your job.
Yeah.
For some people, they love being a doctor. They love running around. They love being on call. They love, being called at 4 o'clock in the morning to jump out of bed and do an emergency laparoscopy for perforated bowel, bro. There's excitement to that. I know guys that are gunning for surgery. They love it. Like, they want to see blood on their hands, right? But don't do it at the expense of happiness. At the end of the day, medicine isn't your identity. It shouldn't overwhelm you, right? There are different sources of contentment from many different sources that are better at 70% than trying to derive 100% contentment from being a surgeon.
That's so true. That's so true. And I really like what you just said, because, and I really agree with it, because I think it's so important every single day to reevaluate where you are in life, and if what you're doing still provides you the same value that it did when you first had that dream. So for me, yes, when I first joined medical school, I also wanted to do surgery as well. I think 90% of people who join med school probably want to do it. But it's really important to, to remember 5 years, like med school is a long period of time. In 5 years from now, your priority is going to change. You might have a family. You might be living somewhere else. You may be, married. Like, your circumstances always change. And if you're not constantly looking at your life and looking at how you're spending your time and whether it's still keeping you as motivated and happy as it did when you first, joined med school, then, it can be quite difficult. On that, Abdul, you mentioned, you may not necessarily be the happiest person. You need to reevaluate your life. Did that ever happen to you guys where you thought, you know what, am I actually really enjoying this as much as I possibly could? And was that ever a thought in your mind that you weren't really necessarily enjoying things? Or was it always, enjoying things most of the time?
I think there are moments, like, there are, even to today, bro, I'll be honest, like, I will do a shift at work, and I work on like an acute frailty unit, so it's like a mini A&E for people above the age of 75. And there are some days I love it. I'm like, yo, this is amazing, this is sick. We've got to see a lot of patients. We managed to treat them. We managed to sort them out. We managed to discharge them, and you feel elate, you feel happy, and you think, do you know what? Doing medicine was the right decision for me. I love it. I love this job. And then there are other days where you're like, this is so bad. It's awful. I'm here by myself. There's so many patients waiting to be seen. I'm struggling. People are sick. We don't have the right resources. So there are moments of good and bad, and I think you have to take the good with the bad. No job in the world, not even entrepreneurship. Even if you're an astronaut, bro, there are good days and bad days. Nothing is, the grass is always green on the other side. We've spoken to so many people that have left medicine, went into banking, analysts, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, name it. I have personal friends there. The satisfaction you get from treating people is uncomparable. Like, it doesn't matter if you have the best job, earning the most money, like the 100K rejected whatever from these jobs, right, outside of medicine. The fulfillment isn't there. And I think it's having the foresight and vision in terms of, I think the most important thing is having the foresight and knowing where you want to be, what's your purpose in life, what's the mission, where do you want to be. And it's that, regret minimization framework, right? When you're 80, when you're 90 years old, you want to look back on your life and say, do you know what? I got to do what I wanted to do. I got to achieve what I wanted to do. And I didn't spend my time maybe in a career I don't necessarily enjoy. I didn't get to do X, Y, and Z, right? And the best thing is look at your regis, look at your consultants, look at other careers and say, do you know what? I can see myself doing that. I see myself with a family and children, or I see myself with a startup, or I see myself doing X, Y, and Z. And I think work towards that. Don't assume. Don't kind of think happiness comes after a certain time period or after certain career milestones. I think we're old enough and sensible enough to know, like, do you know what? I might not enjoy this job for the next 10, 15 years. So why am I going to kind of struggle, get through the system, and then only 10, 15 years later to realize, yeah, I was right.
Exactly.
It's foresight and experience, I guess, to a certain degree.
Okay. Exactly. I think, so just to reiterate that point.
Yeah.
So in a climate where I think it looks like a little bit of a doom and gloom, grey clouds over the medical community, over the healthcare community, we have to accept that it is such an incredible job. And I just want to reiterate, when patients come in through the door really unwell, right? They might be your 100th patient, but you're their first doctor, right? And when you speak to them, when you empathize, when you understand, when you give them that antibiotic and it suddenly just changes things, or when they come in with a kidney stone and you give them a bit of just painkillers and suddenly they can walk again and they're not hunched up and in agony, that the fulfillment you get from them being so well all of a sudden is incredible. And they are so grateful to you. They are genuine from the bottom of their hearts, so grateful. I had a patient say, I'm going to pray for you for the rest of my life. And I was like, wow, how are you going to remember me for the rest of your life? It was just something small I did. But it's incredible. And then the opposite side of the coin. So I know sometimes we think the grass is always green on the other side, right? So even in the world of entrepreneurship, growing Peer, growing the podcast, you've experienced that bit as well with growing your channel, your YouTube and everything, right? Yeah. There are days when you're like, damn, man, this is a bit frustrating. This is a bit boring. This is a bit tedious. Or when you're doing something, or I wish I could show you right now. I don't want to show you because it's a bit long. The list of rejections you get from your applications, right? It's long as my arm when I'm going out there or doing certain things, the rejection list. So there's low moments and everything, but I think you have to look at the overarching thing. Does it overall excite you? Does the mission excite you? Does what you're doing excite you? I've got a mate who loves surgery, who loves it. He, the thought of doing it, the anatomy, the thrill of it, just knowing it all excites him. And you know what? Him being in theatre is incredible. But I've had moments with Abdul where we're in theatre and we're just staring at the clock like, and then you can see the surgery, there's a little bit maybe of a delay and you're like, oh my God, or the junior's now going to close and you're like there, oh, this is going to be an extra hour, man. We're looking, and my colleague who loves surgery, he's there like, another hour. Yes, I'm going to stay here. That's okay. That's okay. And I think it's the idea of regret minimization, right? Taste what you love, and then keep your hands in the areas that you love, and you'll find that naturally you'll find that hybrid position. So for example, right, I love medicine, right, and doing entrepreneurship. I think I'm going to be pushed to a point, right, where I'll have to spend maybe 95% of my time in entrepreneurship, but just for the love of medicine, I might still just pick up that shift because I love it. And I don't know what life's going to force me into, whether I have to completely give it up, but I'm going to try and hold on to it. I'm going to try and hold on to it because I do love that, practicing medicine at the same time. But we'll see where life, I'm open to opportunity. And I think that's important for everyone trying to discover their passion. Be open to opportunity and where life will take you.
Yeah. And it's like you said just now, being open is, I think, the key point. And the reason why I love medicine so much is that if you end up being, after 5 years of training in med school, if you end up being this surgeon that you described who is really so passionate about it, then like that's amazing. Go and do it, and medicine will allow you to do it. But equally, if you actually realize after 5 years, you know what, I want to dabble in entrepreneurship, in music, and art. Medicine allows you that choice and that ability to be able to pursue those side hustles. So like you guys now, just before we started the podcast, you said to me, you're working 2 or 3 days in A&E and spending the rest of your time working on Peer. And medicine allows you that balance. Like, I don't know if there's any other career where you can go into banking and say, do you mind if I can just do one shift in banking a month? They'll obviously be like, no, that's wasting our time. So here's our resources. But in medicine, you can literally go and do 8 hours a month if you wanted to, 8 hours a year if you wanted to, like you said, and just dip your toes in for that passion. So that's the beauty of medicine, really. All right, so the question I always ask people who come on my channel, after going through all of medical school, being a junior doctor for 1 or 2 years, for 2 years, then also being where you are now, in the entrepreneurship kind of game, was the juice worth the squeeze in the end? And was it all worth it to get to where you guys now are, having gone through all that training in medical school?
Hands down, yes. Hands down, the medical degree, right, is the best degree you can do, hands down. And I'll tell you why. It's because if we look at it from a single dimension, you might think, it's just making you a doctor. But don't forget everything else that gives you. And I don't think very few courses will give you these things. So, for example, the discipline, the ability to balance so many different responsibilities. When it forces you to a placement miles away from home, it pushes independence out of you. The communication skills. When you're talking to a patient, you're not just talking, right? You're building a rapport, a bond. You're negotiating. At the same time, you're digging for answers. You're problem solving. The list is endless. Honestly, the list is endless. When I look back at what medicine has given me, I don't think any other course could have given me that. And even training as a junior doctor, right? The things that it gives you, the way it trains you, you're such a multi-dimensional person, right? The way you're doing things, the way you're organizing your lists, the way you even task manage. Different doctors do it in different ways. So I do it the traditional way, I think, that most people do, which is the square boxes. You half shade it in when you started the task and complete it at the end of the day when you're reviewing. So it pushes you to the limits. It teaches you so much more than just a course, than just to become a doctor. It just teaches you so many things. So when you say, was it worth it? Man, hands down, it was worth it. And don't forget, man, one of the reasons why I did do medicine is also to make my parents proud. I genuinely want to make my parents proud. And their smile on their face when I graduated, that alone was worth it. That alone was worth it. And now when I tell them about my mission in life, about trying to put education into the hands of everyone across the world, and when they've had their look at peer and everything, when they see this, they appreciate that also. I'm trying to use those skills from medicine to do something incredible as well. So they appreciate that. And I don't think I would be the person I am without medicine. No way.
Amazing. Amazing. How about you, Abdul?
I'm summarizing it well. Everything we do now really treats off the back of medicine, as in, for us, kind of medicine gave us a way out. Like, we would have been, who knows, doing what. I know medicine gets a lot of hate. You know, there's always stuff happening on med twists and this and that. But I think when you see medicine through a single lens of, okay, I just get to be a doctor, and you fail the other stuff, that's when you kind of see it as not worth it. But medicine opens up so many doors. Like you said, you have the opportunity to work 1 day a week, or you can work 7 days a week. You learn people, you get to do such an amazing, incredible job in the world that not many people have the luxury or privilege to do. You get to do entrepreneurship, you get to do all of this stuff on the side. Everything that we have now is because of medicine, really.
You know the saying, medicine has something for everyone. That is so true. Yeah. That is so true.
With medicine, let's say you do medicine, you don't need to necessarily be a junior doctor, right? If you don't have a passion and you don't like the way things are, you can go work for an ed tech company or a med tech company that, you know, is doing life-saving treatments for cancer or ENT repairs or certain apps and products, right? Medicine opens up that door for you. You can still help people. I don't think there's anything else in the world that has such an intimate connection helping people than medicine does. And it is a bit unfair to see this, the hate it gets sometimes. There's issues, bro. I get that. There's issues in the workforce. There's issues in hospitals. But what other places that have issues like that? It's what you do with it. And I think that's where the key is.
That's so true. That's so true. And yeah, guys, like that's a great place to end, I think. And if people, you know, resonate with what you say, they like what you want to do, like what you do, they want to check out Peer and Scrubbed In, where can they find you guys?
Peer is www.peer.io. It's basically a website. Go there, and it's different to how med is taught. For the first time, you as an educator, you get ownership. You get to build your own audience. You get to earn passive income. We share our profits with everyone each month. We're not here like a monopolistic company where we buy content and then rebrand it as ours. And the podcast Scrubbed In, you know, our motto is sharing the stories of incredible people in healthcare. And that's available in pretty much every major podcast platform, you know, Apple, Spotify, Google. And obviously the YouTube channel is there. It's not as big as yours. We're only on a few hundred subs. But that's our little way of kind of giving back and kind of taking you all on our journey.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the channel, telling us about your amazing story. And thank you guys so much as well for watching. And I'll see you guys on the next one.